Good afternoon. The West is done for today. Now, the review will wait until after this Tampa game is done and the Rangers-Toronto game is done, so it's still going to be pretty early at night when I post the review tonight. But I wanted to do an update on the race in the West, and it is a race again. We're finally seeing some teams playing well, and don't look now, but Chicago's in this. So, leading the chart of maybes is Dallas. Dallas is only 4 points clear now of that line, but they have a game in hand on both Chicago and Vancouver. The problem with them is they only won one of three this week. They lost 3-2 at Arizona. They lost 3-2 in overtime against Nashville, and they won 5-4 versus Arizona. These are not scores that make me say, "Oh yeah, no, Dallas is going places." I don't see it. St. Louis, on the other hand, they've got hot at the right time. They're 2 points back of Dallas and with a game in hand. So St. Louis can be as high as third at this time next week. They won 5-4 today at Nashville. They lost 3-2, or they won 3-2 versus Nashville yesterday. They won 1-0 in overtime at Tampa, and they won 3-2 at Florida. So 4 wins in the last 7 days. This, of course, I'm tracking back to last Sunday's games, because when I did this last Sunday, it was before the games were done for the day. Minnesota is above the line, but they have to be concerned. They're only 2 points ahead of Vancouver, same number of games played. They're only 4 points ahead of Chicago, same amount of games played. And you look at the records, they lose 2-1 today against the New York Islanders. They win 4-2 at the New Jersey Devils before that, but prior to that, they lost 4-1 against Edmonton, and they lost in a shootout 5-4 at Buffalo. So they come out of this week 1-2-1. That's not good enough. That being said, the Canucks, they had a rough week as well. The win last night makes you kind of feel good, but they're still sitting with 57 points in 56 games, so they're 2 points out of the playoffs. Of course, they win in a shootout last night, 4-3. Before that, that was against Calgary. They lost 4-3 in overtime at Chicago. They lost 3-2 at Washington and lost 2-1 at Philly. So their record for the week is 1-2-1. And I know my power rankings, there are Canuck fans that aren't happy that the Canucks dropped, but they won 1 out of 4 games, and that one was stolen by Markstrom. Markstrom, that's absolute complete theft. So, yeah, they can't move up after that. Because the circumstances being what they are, I can't look and go, well, yeah, but they played well, so I'm going to bump them up. That's, no. Chicago, 56 games, 55 points. They're 4 points out of the playoffs. They've been on a tremendous winning streak now. They win 5-2 versus Detroit today. They won 4-3 in overtime versus Vancouver, and they won 6-2 against Edmonton. So they're beating the teams they have to. Edmonton's on the board. Vancouver's on the board. They are making sure that they win games where they have direct control over who finishes where. So when they're up against a rival, they play very well. Against Detroit, which totally would have been understandable if they'd had a letdown, and it didn't happen. So they won all 3 games they played this week. Colorado is doing their best to back out, but they don't want to fall below 500, so they just keep losing in overtime so that their regulation wins, or their wins and regulation losses stay the same. They lost in overtime 3 games in a row now. At Boston, 2-1. Islanders, 4-3. Washington 4-3, and that was after losing 6-3 at home against Columbus to start the week. So they're 0-1-3 overall. That's just ugly. And they're now 5 points out. They do have 2 games in hand, but they're 5 points out. They no longer have control over their destiny. If they win both games in hand, they're still out of the playoffs. Arizona now finds themselves 6 points back. They have 1 game in hand, but they're getting close to being a team that I look at and say, yeah, they're not going to make it officially. So in other words, at some point I'll stop putting them on the board. Arizona won 3-2 versus Dallas, of course. Before that, they lost 4-2 versus Columbus. They lost 5-2 at Nashville, and they lost 5-4 at Dallas. So they're 1-3 on the week. Yeah, it's getting tougher to make the math work for Arizona to make a run at it, because now they've got to jump past 4 teams to get into the playoffs. It's not just a matter of getting all the wins. It's the teams ahead of you have to lose too. The Oilers, 53 points, 55 games. They're sitting 6 points back now. They have a game in hand on Minnesota, but again, they have a lot of teams to go past too. They lose, of course, last night at home against San Jose 5-2. Prior to that, they had the 4-1 win at Minnesota. And just think, if Minnesota won that, they'd be at 61 points, and we wouldn't be talking about them potentially finding themselves on the outside within a week. But yeah, so they won 4-1 at Minnesota. They lost 6-2 versus Chicago, and they lost 4-3 in overtime at Montreal. The Oilers finished the week 1-2-1, so they have the same record as Vancouver this week, and the same record as Minnesota. So when you look on the board, there are a lot of teams, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, who technically lost more than they won. But when you factor in overtime losses, technically Dallas didn't finish below 500 on the week. That's out of 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So it's still it's not great results, but there's some teams picking it up. LA's one of the teams picking it up. They're 51 points. So how tough's the math now? They're 8 points out. It is still really tough. They have 27 games left to make up the 8-point difference and jump past Edmonton, Arizona, Colorado, Chicago, Vancouver, and then one of these 3 teams to make the playoffs. This week they lost 5-4 in overtime at Boston. They won 3-2 in a shootout at Philly. They won at New Jersey 5-1, and they won at the New York Rangers 4-3 in overtime to go 3-0-1 on the week. So for Canuck fans to say, why are we behind LA? There's your answer, because when LA went back east, they were able to win games that Vancouver wasn't winning during their road trip. So to me, I had to have LA higher up right now on power rankings. Which team I think is playing better? Anaheim, of course, they are the worst team in the league right now. They're 8 points back. They don't have a game in hand, and yeah, I completely see them as being done. You know, when I did this last week, weren't they up in here? Anyways, they lose 6-2 at Philly, 4-0 at Ottawa, 4-1 at Montreal, and 6-1 at Toronto. They're 0-4 on the week. They allow 6, 10, 14, 20 goals, and they score 4. So they had to get outscored 20-4 for owners to go, all right, that's enough. We've had enough. That's it. It's an embarrassing week across the board, literally, for the Anaheim Ducks. And as soon as next week, I would think any team that's 8 points or further back, I don't have to put them on the board. But there you go. The race in the West is finally looking like a race. Chicago has helped make it that way. St. Louis has definitely helped there, because if not for Chicago and St. Louis, I would still be talking about how nobody in the West seems to want it. So maybe Chicago and St. Louis end up getting in there. Maybe Minnesota's going to be the one that drops out and Chicago gets in. It'll be very interesting to see what happens, because for Chicago, like today, Cam Ward has a really good game. Dealey has been playing well. Be interesting to see who they'd go with in the first round of the playoffs, should they get there. And they're not going to be an easy out if they make the playoffs, because it's Chicago. It's Taves. It's Kane. It's Keith. It's Seabrook. It's that same cast, and they would want to go for one last run at it. So I really believe that Chicago could very well be one of the wild cards by the end of the year. But they have to be able to take this 7-game winning streak and maintain that momentum and make sure they didn't peak too early. So let me know your thoughts in the comments section below. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe. If you're browsing your way through, just tap upon this video. And thank you guys so much for watching. I'll talk to you again soon.